Is Leslie Adams from the Ontario Environment Network. The Ontario Environment Network is a nonprofit, non-governmental network that assists Ontario environmental groups and individuals who are working towards sustainability. Leslie personally is actively involved in mainstreaming sustainability focused on biodiversity from the international to individual level, and I'm going to ask her to explain what that means, and she's going to be doing a presentation for us, inshallah.
So I have a bit of a cold, so I apologize if my voice gets a little hoarse. I'm also very animated when I talk, so I apologize if I do this. I'll try to project at the same time. Maybe I won't need the microphone. And this is the first time I've been standing on a stage doing this. Usually my laptop is right there and I can see it well and my notes are there, so I might be a little fumbly here. But I wanted to thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I have done some other faith-based presentations, but this is the first opportunity I've had to speak to a predominantly Muslim community, and I very much appreciate it. I try to take the time and the effort to reach out cross-culturally to engage us in a common direction. And I was very thankful for the discussion that I was party to when I first came here. So personally, my journey has led me to me standing here today. My background is in psychology. I have a land use planning background as well. I've had the opportunity to participate in the international forums. I've been on the Canadian delegation to the Commission for Sustainable Development. I've met many colleagues and friends now from around the world in civil society and governments who are as committed to trying to enable a sustainable future for all of us. My passion, however, is trying to get us to reconnect to that web of life. We are all a part of that web of life. We don't stand outside of it. We don't stand behind it. We are part of it. We are integral to it, and it is integral to our survival and our prosperity and our health. So one of the things, I'm going to put glasses on. Too many hands. I need a little table up here. So I wanted to start with through the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, we do a lot of work on diversity, and it's both cultural diversity and biological diversity. So I wanted to start with a bit of a statement that cultural and biological diversity is closely interwoven to form a symbiotic relationship which may in fact hold the key to global sustainability. I really do believe that. I think this is something that is pretty integral. Some of the major religions of the world contain the blueprints for the conservation of natural biodiversity, since it provides the ethical and social models for regulating our relationships with nature. To me, this is very profound. When I read this and thought about doing this today, this is one of those pieces that I went and pulled back out. And it's actually from a scholar, a Muslim scholar, from a journal article that I'd read to try to understand a little bit about your culture. So with that in mind, I'm going to get going. Before I do, I just wanted to recognize that right now we're standing on the Mississauga of the New Credit, the Aboriginal or the Indigenous people of Canada. So I just wanted to take a moment and recognize that this is their traditional territory, and we thank them and their creator for allowing us to share this space with them today. So now that I've got my formalities out of the way, I'm here to talk about living green, and I want to talk about actions for biodiversity. So I don't know if anyone has a really clear understanding of what biodiversity is, but it really is fundamental to everything we are, everything we do. We are part of it. We come from creation. We go back to creation. Everything we're sitting on, everything we're wearing, the stage I'm standing on, plastic in this thing, all comes from biodiversity. The only things that don't actually come out of that circle of life is man-made chemicals. Everything else, our air, our water, it's all very, very, very tied in together. So I'm not going to tend to read slides. I'm going to tend to talk, but for me, this is probably where my spirituality and faith comes from, is from believing so fundamentally in our connections to one another and to our natural living world and to the world itself. So when we think about biodiversity, I talk about biodiversity the way the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity uses the term. It's not a definition, it's an understanding. So biodiversity includes genetic diversity, both within an individual and between different individuals of that species. So it's reflective in our color of our hair, our eyes, your earlobes, your tongue, this plant, that plant. It's reflective in anything. It's the building blocks inside of us that do have a reflection externally in how we are. The, going too fast. So the second component is species diversity. So we are one of a myriad of species on this planet. We are all species, from the smallest little teeny tiny amoeba, single-celled organisms, those are species. The species we find in our soil, these are all living things that are integral to our survival. We don't even know what they do for us. It also includes giant sequoias, these plants. It includes the whales, the dolphins, the cows, the turtles, all the trees, all those species. We are one of those species. We are not, they are not below us. We are dependent on them. They help support us and keep us able to function the way we do. The third piece, when I talk about biodiversity, I talk about ecosystems and the goods and service that they give us. So I'm particularly, so ecosystems are, excuse me, ecosystems, forest ecosystems, savanna, Arctic, coral reef, rainforest, marsh. This could be a little mini ecosystem because it's got a certain plant and a soil, and there's probably microbes in that soil. If we looked under a microscope, we could see that this could be a mini ecosystem. So the ecosystem component tends to be the one that we see very visually. It could be whatever we want, a farmer's field. Even an urban environment is a form of an ecosystem. It can be a very degraded ecosystem. It can be a very desertified ecosystem, but it is an ecosystem. The thing I'm particularly interested in trying to help me, for myself to understand it, but also to get other people to understand it and recognize it, is this idea of goods and services. So the goods and services the ecosystem gives us is our air, is our water, is our food, is the wood I'm standing on. These things we tend not to account for when we're looking at what we're going to do on a landscape. We don't look at that value that nature gives us, those services they provide us free of charge and have for eternity. But there's limits to all of these things. And a wetland can only filter so much water if it's inundated or if it's shrunk. The soil can only feed us so well if it's not overpolluted with chemicals and stripped and buried underground. So it really is this connection. So when we think of ecosystems, the goods are pretty obvious. It's my banana. It's my clothing, as long as it's not synthetic clothing. It's the walls. It's the mortar that goes into the foundation. It's the cement. It's all of those things. It's also the medicines that come naturally out of nature, out of our biodiversity. Those are goods. The services, we tend not to see them, and we tend to take them more for granted. We tend to forget about these services that nature provides us free of charge and that are fundamental to everything. If we don't have water, we have nothing. If we don't have air, we have nothing. These are things nature does for us free of charge. We have to respect nature and enable nature to continue giving back to us for us to be able to go forward into the 22nd century, maybe? So just a quick, so ecosystem services is something that's been evolving conceptually for about 25 years. So they've always been there, but there's been a lot more research, a lot of language, a lot of trying to understand how this is. And in 2005, kind of a pivotal point in looking at this in trying to value those ecosystem services, there was something called the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. And from that point forward, we've slowly been evolving this language and dialogue where countries around the world, ours included, are trying to include natural capital as a way that they've kind of, you want to have the recognition of the value without the commodification of nature. So the term natural capital is something that people are starting to consider. And in something I'm going to speak about in a moment, the Convention on Biodiversity, one of the goals is to all countries who signed the strategic plan, ours is one of them, is to incorporate natural capital into gross domestic product by 2020. So we have statisticians at the federal level who are trying to figure out how do you account for that. One of the concerns from civil society, I work primarily with non-government organizations, is I am deathly afraid of us saying, well, it's worth $2 million a year. I'll give you $2 million and forget about it. Get rid of that wetland, get rid of that farmer's field, get rid of that old growth forest, get rid of that whatever it is. We're very concerned about this concept of ecological goods and services and natural capital if it's a commodification exercise. We want the value. We want a whole bunch of other things, but we don't want someone to be able to come in and say, I'll give you $1 billion. It's gone. Because we need that not for us. We need that for all the living things on the planet, and we need it for future generations. So that's my spiel on that for now. The other point I wanted to make, and it does get much happier. I mean, I love what I do, and I love enabling, and I take actions as much as I can, and I try to engage people, and I try to do what I can. But we are at the point where we are in the 6th greatest extinction, mass extinction that the planet has ever seen, and it's we that are causing it. Because we have been able to come in and take over function and displace other species. We are creating the 6th mass extinction, but the biggest difference in what we're doing compared to asteroids hitting the ground, ice ages coming in, so 95% of the species that have been on this planet are no longer here. Things evolve and take their place, but 95% are gone from, if you look through all the records. But what we're doing, so the Anthropocene extinction, so we've moved into a new period in the geological record, I guess you would say. So we're in the Holocene period, and it started a while back actually, but it's run from when we came onto the face of the planet and what we have done to the species on the face of this planet over the past 50,000, 100,000. I'm not a geologist. No, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not a paleontologist. No, what are you when you study? Anyways, I'm not someone who knows that term right now, but I do know what we're doing is a slow march to that. This one I will read, because it's the whole idea that we're losing, I think it's about 1%. Am I going to be okay here? Thank you. Can someone else read it there? So we're losing about 0.72% of our biodiversity, our species diversity. And that includes microbes, includes all species annually. But at this rate, by 2200, 95% is going to be gone again. And it's all because of us. So this is something that's, to me, is hugely alarming. If you're interested in this type of information, there is tons out there. Like if you go down this rabbit hole of getting into mass extinction or getting into biodiversity, getting into ecosystem services, you go down the hole, it's a warren underground. It's like all over the place. There's so much. It can be overwhelming. I get overwhelmed, and I've been doing it for years, and you look at something, you go, oh, I haven't looked at that in a while, and you go, oh my God, look at the literature. Oh my goodness, look what people have been saying. It's quite remarkable. But with this idea of mass extinction, there was a United Nations Environment Program just held meetings at the beginning of this month, actually, and they released a new report. So when you look at where we are with climate change, we are we're in the same boat with our planet in a lot of ways, but the threats and the loss of biodiversity is very significant. But there's time. I mean, if we choose to turn the ship, there is time to get something done. So, the Convention on Biodiversity. I am probably one of the biggest fans, and I try to talk about this thing all the time. I try to enable, I try to learn from it. I try to get people engaged in it, because for me, this is my plan. This is something that spoke to me for whatever reason, and I'm fully engaged with the convention and also with the Secretariat's office in Montreal. And I don't know why it's coming up one at a time. Just we went too far. So, rats. So the Convention on Biodiversity came into being in 1992 at the Earth Summit. It was developed prior to 1992, but it was open for signing in 1992. So the Earth Summit, the World, UNCED, United Nations Convention on Environment and Development, was the stimulator for all the work we do now around sustainable development. The CSD used to be the Commission for Sustainable Development. If anyone has heard or participated at a municipal level or in a corporate setting, they're trying to do sustainability strategies. This all evolved out of the Earth Summit, or UNCED, the United Nations Summit on Environment and Development. Convention, not a summit. At the convention, at the summit, at the Earth Summit, I'm going to use that name, there were 3 conventions that came into being. One was the Convention on Climate Change. The second was the Convention on Biodiversity, and the third is the Convention to Combat Desertification. So I do a certain amount of work in some countries, very marginally, on trying to assist in stopping desertification, because this is, we're messing up our ecosystems, we're messing up those core functions. As a side, I think that urbanization is a form of desertification in a lot of ways. Nothing can grow there. The water can't do what it's supposed to do. But that's an aside. So Rio, 1992, Earth Summit. Convention on Biodiversity came into being. Climate change. I'm going to assume the majority of the audience has heard something about Convention on Climate Change and the Kyoto Protocol. We have the Convention on Biodiversity. We have our own protocols, and I'll get to that. But these things are agreed to globally. They're soft policy. They're not hard policy. It's not like if I run through a red light and the cop's sitting there, I get a ticket. These are global directions and policy that all the countries, imagine, I can barely agree with my husband what's for dinner, let alone trying to agree. All these countries agreed that we need to do something to stop environmental degradation. All the countries. So we've got all these great things, but they are the lowest common denominator. They are the least. It is not the best of what we aspire to. It's the bottom of the floor for where we should be starting from, and always trying to nudge it up a little bit, or walking in and talking to someone and saying, that's awesome, we can do more. And how about we try to do this? Because those best practices become the floor eventually. So the convention was open for signing at the summit in 1992, and Canada was the first to sign and ratify the Convention on Biodiversity, and the Secretariat's office is in Montreal. So we have the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity Secretarial Office in Montreal, which means if you go up to Montreal and you want to go into their offices and look at the museum they have and engage with them, they're going to want to do that. I do so much work with the Secretariat's office. When I say work, I'm a hardcore volunteer. I'm not getting paid to do any of this. I'm doing it because I believe it is the right thing to do. But they assist me so much. I don't have many of those resources here today, but it's been quite amazing. The Secretariat's office, one of the things I'm involved in is the Canadian Environmental Network, and we have a memorandum of understanding with the Biodiversity Caucus. I'm co-chair of it, with the Secretariat's office. So we have regular meetings with them. You try to enable them. They are executive secretary, Braulio de Diaz is the executive secretary right now. These poor people, I feel so bad for bureaucrats. If you're in there because you are a public servant, and bad enough I've got a country to deal with, I've got to answer to 192 countries because they've all signed and ratified the Convention on Biodiversity, the CBD. But they are amazing people who want to help. And I think they like to help me because I want to do this. I want to talk about it and get us all moving a little bit, not doing it all at the same time, but moving a little bit. So the convention in 1992, it was open for signing. It came into force on December 29th, 1993. So where are we now? So I've talked to you, so the Convention on Biodiversity, we've got an international convention. There's a lot of work that goes on at country levels too. So with 192 countries that have signed and ratified, I think the only ones that have not, it's probably new countries I don't know about because things change, but Holy See, Andorra, and the United States, they haven't ratified it. They've signed it, but they haven't ratified it. And that's, I could get into that if someone wants to understand that nuance. But every other country in the world has signed and ratified the Convention on Biodiversity, more than any of the other conventions, more than anything else, because it's soft policy and it's kind of like you look at it and go, yeah, no kidding, we should be doing these things. So I can't see. So 190 countries. Oh, main objectives of the CBD are to stop the, are to, can I come down so I don't misrepresent? The conservation of biological diversity, the sustainable use of the components arising out of biodiversity. This is, to me, makes sense. And the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. So this is text of the convention. This is what they actually say. So those three objectives are what everything the convention seeks to do. So let's see. So it is a multilateral environmental agreement. So that's like the Convention on Climate Change. Multilateral environmental agreements are bilateral or multilateral. Canada is party to about, I think it's about 95. Bilateral or multilateral. It means bilateral is two country. It's like a trade deal. It's like all the other things. It's all language. This is all terminology. The multilateral means all these countries have come together and agreed, like the Convention on Climate Change. We have, so you have the Kyoto Protocol with the UNFCCC. We have the Nagoya Protocol and the Cartagena Protocol, and we have a protocol for liability and redress. Cartagena Protocol is on genetically modified organisms. In the international language, we talk about living modified organisms and the ability of technology to alter genes to splice. This is a huge issue internationally. And if anyone's familiar with some of these issues, a lot of what's going on globally is because of the Cartagena Protocol. Canada has not signed nor ratified the Cartagena Protocol because of the relationships with the United States primarily. So I'll leave it at that. So the liability and redress is a subsidiary agreement to the Cartagena Protocol that if things get out of control, here's what you gotta do. So they have gone through and negotiated. Canada doesn't take part in those negotiations. We have no say at that table because we haven't signed and ratified it. If you want to talk at that table in a protocol, you have to have signed and ratified it. So we have the Cartagena and liability and redress. Liability is a subset of Cartagena. And then we have the Nagoya Protocol. So the Nagoya Protocol is for access and benefit sharing. That was one of the main goals or objectives of the convention. And it's really to make sure that we don't take from indigenous community without fair compensation, at the very least. We don't take from indigenous community without respect for their traditions and their cultures. We don't walk in and take that genetic information and that cultural knowledge, that traditional knowledge of, yeah, well, I know if I use this plant, or I know whatever it is, and walk away without some type of benefit sharing. So Canada has not signed nor ratified the Nagoya Protocol, but I think they will. But what's going on is countries, developing countries particularly, this is where when you have indigenous people on a landscape living their cultural ways, their traditional ways, they're being protected from multinationals a lot of times, even countries, even their own country, from coming in and just taking what they know and taking their resources and taking what they have and walking away and showing them their back. So countries are doing this. A lot of the developing countries have signed the Nagoya Protocol. Mexico has signed Nagoya and ratified. You have to sign and then you have to ratify. Anyways, you have to incorporate it into law. And what's happening, so Canada has a lot of mining, and that is an impact on access and benefit sharing. And they do a lot of bioprospecting too, a lot of Canadian companies, because the country has ratified it and it's in place in that country. I'm coming as a Canadian multinational. I'm coming to your country and I'm getting slowed, thrown to the bottom of the pile, because you get kind of like a green light if you've done this work and if your country has done this work. So it's quite interesting to see the power, to some degrees, going back into the hands of traditional people on a landscape where they're not being 100% taken advantage of. In our country, so I do a certain amount of work through the Canadian Environmental Network on access and benefit sharing in Canada, and trying to engage our Aboriginal communities to at first even know it's there. Because we don't know. These things, nobody knows they're there. And if we don't take them and use them and enable them and talk about them and flash it around and try to engage on it, nothing happens. It's all about taking action. So, okay, and I do feel, I think this last statement, where we are with the Convention on Biodiversity is probably where, in the minds of people, in the awareness of people, is probably where climate change was about 10 years ago. So we have at the international level, we are standing in the midpoint of the United Nations Decade on Biodiversity. We are a smack dab. Started in 2011, runs till 2020. I was in Japan. That's where the Conference of Parties was. We took 7 youth from Halton and Peel with us who are under the age of 18 to the Conference of the Parties. They met with youth from around the world and created we created the GYBN, Global Youth Biodiversity Network. The youth we brought, some of them are still engaged, some of them have moved on. But the voice of youth, and this is, I'm very interested in enabling youth voice to find their space, to be respectful and proper, but don't let people tell you can't do something. That what I've seen youth be able to do at the international level when they're diplomatic and respectful, it's amazing, because youth under 35 is more than half the population on our planet. Not in my country, probably not in the United States, but globally, there's more young people than there's old people. The world is yours. The world is the youth. So anyways, I really do like youth. So I love working with youth. So, so 2011, 2020, we have, wait, I'll use one of my props. So this is the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity. It's called the HE Goals and Targets. So we were there when they finalized this, and we were there when they decided they would have a decade. So 2010 was the International Year for Biodiversity, and 2011 to 2020 is our decade on biodiversity. So we have goals and targets. Our federal government, probably all your countries that you still talk to family and friends in, have signed and ratified this. 192 countries. You look at this, you go, oh, well, hang on a minute. How can I enable this more? And it's not about going, you have to do it. It's about, how can I help you do it? How can we enable this? What's my role and responsibility? Oh, government, you might not be doing quite what you're supposed to. I got an idea. What if we try? So that's the way that the people I work with, we use that. So we have 6 goals, 20 targets for the international goals and targets. So, and I am going to talk about, I should probably talk quicker because I can blah, blah, blah for hours. But I'm going to talk to you a bit about invasive species. So if there's actions that you want to take, knowing, identifying, monitoring, and using native species, getting rid of non-native invasives, and introducing native species, pollinator species, monarch species, this idea of plants are the key to everything. Plants are our keys for function, for cycles, for so much. But target 9 in this one is invasive species, because it's a global issue. This is the vision for the convention. So yeah, we got a decade till 2020, but this is till 2050. This plan is really till 2050. And what we're trying to do is shift the consciousness so that we're back in the web of life. We recognize it. So this is the vision agreed to by all 192 countries. By 2050, biodiversity is valued, conserved, restored, and wisely used, maintaining ecosystem services, sustaining a healthy planet, and delivering benefits for people. So that's my call to action. That's what I try to do. I try to enable that, and I try to do it not just for people, I try to do it for other species too, because I feel they have as much right as I do. So we've got this international goals and targets. It's a biodiversity strategy and action plan, a BSAP is what they kind of go down the road in. We have an Ontario strategy from 2011 to 2020. So one of the things I do is sit with the Ontario Biodiversity Council. So in Ontario, we have this, and what we did is the Ontario strategy is nested in this one. So we didn't go off on some other wild tangent or anything like that. What you did was brought what we had globally agreed to, didn't get everything, but they got most of it, and brought it into our Ontario strategy. So this, right now our focus, we had a biodiversity summit last year in Niagara Falls, and our focus right now is on resilience of ecosystem. Because if we don't enhance the resilience, they can't respond to what's coming their way, and they can't do for us what we're asking of them. So we also have a national strategy. So in last year, actually, so because the federal government signed off on the Convention on Biodiversity and agreed to the strategic plan, the international strategic plan, one of the goals, or one of the targets in here, is by 2015, all countries who are signatories to the CBD have updated their biodiversity strategies to include these goals and targets. So we have that now. Woo woo. Another lever, another thing you can work with, enable. We've been going to other provinces. So Ontario's mechanism of operation is unique in Canada, probably in a lot of places. But we've started going to other provinces and trying to engage them, because they all have them, kind of. But you're trying to bring the formation of the council and the way it operates to the other provinces, and we're having some success. So we also have, we're in Peel here, but in Halton region, we have a local biodiversity strategy and action plan. So, and I didn't bring it, because I brought enough. But so that local one, there's a little image there. It's focused on primarily on invasive species in our regional forests. So we have a natural heritage system in Halton, and Halton does very well with these types of planning, more or less. Nothing's perfect. But we took the international, the national, provincial, and put the regional one, the Halton region one, there. So it references, it takes, and then it articulates it in our, are you standing up? Because I'm, Oh, okay, go faster. Yes, wait, hang on. Okay, we're going really fast now. Whoop. Hang on. So threats to biodiversity, habitat loss, invasive alien species, population pollution, overconsumption, and things like climate change and desertification. Invasive species, when I talk about non-native invasive species, it's things that couldn't have got here on their own. There's lots of them out there. So we focus particularly on plants. So dollars to donuts, the maple trees sitting out here are Norway maple. They're not native maple trees. Those keys get into a natural area and they outcompete all our native species. They're really quite aggressive. They take over, they change the ecosystem, they change soils. Not just Norway maples, they're not too bad, but there is a lot of plants. Because of where we are in the country, Ontario is really trapped by invasive species. There's a lot of species in our neck of the woods. So, how much longer do I have? 5 minutes? 3 minutes? Okay. So I'm going to say if there's one thing you can do to help stop invasive species is, you guys know what periwinkle is? Have anyone seen periwinkle? I should have brought a bunch of pictures. Anyways, there's a lot of native plants you can buy in a garden center that are non-native invasive species. There's a plant called dog strangling vine that monarch butterflies mistake it for milkweed because it's in the same family, and they lay their eggs on it, and the monarchs don't survive, so it impacts the monarch populations globally. There's a lot of plants in nurseries. If you're trying to grow food or plant flowers even, some of them have neonicotinoids that have been used. They're genetically modified plants, so you can spray them and they won't die with a pesticide. If you put those plants in your garden and the bees come to the plant to take the pollen, they can die. So that it gets right into their system. So there's lots on plants, but you can plant a native plant. You can choose to say to the garden center or whatever, where is that from? Is it like this? If they don't know, so it's not to say, oh my God, you're doing it. It's to educate them. I go in, I go, oh, periwinkle, oh, you know that this is non-native. People look at you, go, what are you talking about? So we're after Loblaws right now, and Canadian Tire. We'll get them next year, but there's lots there where they'll not do it anymore, so that you don't have to worry about making that choice. You know these things are safe. If you know the question to ask, all you got to do is ask a question. We're going to skip. There is lots. I can leave a copy if anyone wants. I can send them more stuff. So I wanted to get to, we have a local project called Victorious, which is Vectors of Invasive Alien Species, that's been funded through the Trillium Foundation. If anyone wants to get engaged and know more or do something on invasives, I'll leave a couple of cards and you can do that. So I'm going to finish with, it's a matter of choice. You want to understand the threats, identify steps we can take, rethink what you're doing. Think of it in a system. How does it all connect? If I do this, and not go overboard, not go, oh my God, I can't do anything anymore. Find one little thing and do it. So I'm a smoker. Woo, I know. What? But I used to throw my cigarette butts on the ground. They all wind up in the water. It's a huge problem. So I don't do that anymore. And I tell everyone I see smoking, do you know? So I'm rethinking what I'm doing and get involved. And I'm going to leave it at that because she's standing up. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. I can go on. Like, if you give me more time, I'm still going.
Actually,
yeah.
If you want to just take a minute, if anyone has any questions for Leslie, we can give a couple of minutes for that. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah. I got a video if you can get it online.
Yes.
No, do you have any questions? There is so, yes. So when you when you ratify something, it means you intend to sign, but then you have to go back and figure out the way that you you sign first, and when you ratify, it's incorporated into your law. How are you going to reflect the directions in your own country law? So you can't ratify until you've done that work, and then you present that to secretary, and that's the same for any and all multilateral environmental agreement. That's a UN process. It's not a Convention on Biodiversity process. Actions? Yes.
Is the Asian carp still a problem in Lake Ontario?
So they have been somewhat successful. What they've done is electrified a channel where they're coming up. They're probably in there. They're probably in Lake Ontario. They're coming up through all the Great Lakes, but they, I think because they're so with invasive species, if you can get them before they've gone crazy, you can control it. So there's another fish called the goby you're not probably ever going to get rid of it in the system. It's probably not there's different levels of being bad, and the Asian carp is very, very bad, and the goby is pretty bad. So, but they're still there. I haven't heard any reports. There's, if you go to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forests, they'll announce anything they find. There's none in our watershed and credit watershed, I'll tell you that much. that much I know. Yeah.
In terms of for garden bear, is there any sort of guide as to which plant, like common garden plants?
Yep, so there's a Plant Me Instead guide, and there's native species guides that I can share links. I didn't want to bring tons of resources, but you can either email me and I'll send you a link directly, or I can share the links back to the community as a whole if you want. There's lots there. Yep.
You said you work with nonprofit organizations. Would you recommend one that you feel like is going in the right direction? That would be, for example, if we wanted to volunteer with or be part of?
Sure, mine. No, so I work at the national level with the Canadian Environmental Network. OEN, I'm co-chair of the Ontario Environment Network. My local ENGO is Protect Our Water and Environmental Resources, and we work in Halton. We work all over. We bring people to, we do a lot, but what I can do is match make you. Depending on what you want to do, I'm pretty well, there's a lot of, I would say Peel doesn't have a lot of environmental organizations. The Conservation Authority is good, but it's very narrow what they let you do. So depending on where your passions are, we should put up a matchmaking website for volunteers and what they want to do, and not-for-profits. That would be a lot of fun. But if you're interested, I'll leave contact information. But what are you interested in?
I can't make a decision right now.
Are you, how old are you? Are you a young person, under 30? 31. So, sorry, I feel bad. Yeah, just if you want to talk for a second afterwards, there's lots, depending on where you want to go and what you want to do with it. It really is. It's passion. Yeah.
I'll just give an example so maybe you can help. She wants to be a marine biologist. She's 15, so would you be able to recommend something?
Yeah, so there is the Right Whale Institute. So the woman who runs it is in Caledon. She bought it's in New Brunswick on the coast. It was a federal research center. They canned it, so she bought it, and she's running the Right Whale foundation out of it. Depending on what you want to do from a marine biology perspective, is it coral, is it ocean acidic? Like, it's so broad, but one of the things, if you're comfortable, we bring youth with us to Mexico, and we do usually in the summer, and we do turtle rescue with a local not-for-profit in Mexico, in Cozumel. So again, there's lots of, if you like policy, I love policy, because without policy, we don't have any rules, and I can't go, hello, I want to change it. But there's a United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, which we're right now doing a biodiversity component for. So if you're interested in that type of stuff, I don't mind. I'm into mentoring, youth especially, and trying to hook you up and get you engaged. And you might go, no, marine biology. No, I don't want to do marine biology anymore, but I want to do something like this. So it takes it's got to be from the heart, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Is that good? Poor man, eh? I'm talking to all the women. It's the mother in me. Okay. Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. If I can be of any assistance at home, at school, wherever, I would love to. Thank you.